What's good, everybody? Drew Peters, VP of Science and Innovation at Alphaline. Now, on today's video, I'm going to talk about something that's not exactly new, but it's gained a lot of popularity over the recent years, MCTs. Both are whole foods as well as world dietary supplements. These have been featured as part of the raging keto diet craze, and a lot of them have brought them to the forefront of their products due to the unique natural energy products that they provide. So, regardless of the reason, whether it be supplementation emerging or through the keto diet, they can and have been a useful tool in the arsenal of many for a variety of applications. Today's goal of this video is to explain what MCTs are and discuss the various forms. Now, one thing I get asked a lot when it comes to formulation with MCTs is what version I prefer. In that case, it's NAB Nutrition's C8Vantage. The particular reason for this is that it has some added benefits such as utilizing pea protein and tapioca for prebiotic fiber, as well as being excellent carriers for the powder format without the clumping. It's also been shown that it can be really great to be a premium source when it comes to specific fatty acid wanted, in that case C8, because there are massive differences, having this one being most potent for specific energy production as well as ketone producing properties, with the C10 and C12 fatty acids removed, making it highly potent. The reason this is important is because they are metabolized differently. Although there's different forms of MCTs we'll cover later, they can have some nasty effects. Well, not nasty, but less desirable effects than what you're taking MCTs for if they're not ratioed properly, including the C8 eliminating the insulin response, making it an ideal application for a variety of things. Once again, I'll cover the variety of those in a second. However, last but not least, one thing that's nice is that it's highly versatile from where it's derived from. It's technically vegan, and with a lot of plant proteins and vegan-based protein formulations, it works excellent for this, as well as a little, Easter egg. It's nice for enhancing the mouthfeel of protein applications in general. So with that being said, before I cover what different forms of MCTs there are, I think one thing that most people don't go in depth on enough is exactly what are MCTs. Fully written out, medium chain triglycerides, known as MCTs for short because it's a lot easier to say, are commonly known as just by the word MCT. They're technically a type of saturated fat, which throws most people off because of the negative stigma regarding saturated fat, and only have 6 to 10 carbons in the fatty acid chain. Within this class, as I mentioned earlier, there's multiple kinds, and they're known as medium chain fatty acids, or MFCAs. And this includes caproic acid, C6, caprylic acid, which is C8, the desirable one, capric acid, which is C10, and lauric acid, which is C12. I already know somebody's going to comment, and that's completely okay, that it's a little bit debatable to include lauric acid in this inclusion, because it may have some of the properties of both MFCA as well as long-chain fatty acids, and though it technically doesn't fit the traditional definition, it has some properties enough to overlap, and it's popular, so I figured it'd be worth mentioning. So, first and foremost, it's important to note that MCTs do in fact occur naturally. Okay. However, the downside of this is much like CLA, it's only available in limited quantities in things like dairy fat as well as tropic oils. With this being said, because it's naturally occurring, a lot of people assume and go to automatically coconut oil thinking it's the same as MCTs. But it's important to note that coconut oil by nature only has a capric acid content, C8, the desired one, of about 6.8%. That's not the desirable ratio. As well as palm kernel oil. That's another common one that comes in MCTs. That one's even worse, having about 3.7% capric acid. Another thing that's important to note here that differentiates them, unlike some other forms of saturated fat, is that MCTs have a very low melting point, which is why it's an oil at room temperature while other saturated fats are solids. This makes it a pretty unique thing and a cool property that it's still a saturated fat, yet it behaves differently. In supplement form, when we make MCT oil, it's typically seen a combination of caprylic acid, about 50 to 80%, as well as capric acid, about 20 to 50%. These sources are extracted from coconut and palm kernel oil commonly, then are distilled, mixed in the various ratios, and combined with glycerin to form triglycerides, with the form that you commonly buy. A key factor here that's important to note is that for MCTs, aside from the length of the fatty acid chain, is the metabolism is very different. That's what gives them these cool benefits. They enter into systemic circulation from the lymph at a relatively slow rate and deliver fatty acids mostly to tissues such as muscle and adipose tissue rather than the liver. They're also very unique that they're not really used in the Krebs cycle. This means that they are redirected toward ketone production, which is why they're popular with keto diets, and little to none is used in fat synthesis and storage, meaning they're extremely hard to store. However, calorie deficit's key. You have to replace, not add fat to your diet if you're looking for that fat loss effect. It's also important to note that while keto is a trending thing, MCT oils consisting primarily of caprylic acid C8 provide a better blood ketone response compared to other standard MCT mixtures. I'm talking up to 25% greater. This further cements that caprylic acid are a powerful driving force of many of the ketogenic MCT oil products, so source does matter. Another huge advantage for things like the C8Vantage compared to other sources because it has the most highly desirable C8 content. So, with that being said, I keep going on and on and on about why C8 versus C10 or C12 is important. So with that being said, let's talk a little bit more about what each one of them does, and we can wrap this up because you don't want to hear me talk all day. Some of the individual nuances and differences of the fatty acids in this class, I guess the ones are primarily focused on really is in the C6. It's always the C8, the C10, and then the C12. And once again, as I mentioned before, C12 is not technically a true MCT by definition. But we'll lead off with the heavy hitter here, the one that everybody desires for the effects when they think of MCTs. C8. Caprylic acid. It's the most predominant MCT found in things like coconut, palm oil, butter, full-fat milk of mammals, so on and so forth. It's also the shortest of the MCTs that are commonly used, making it the most rapidly assimilating, and is why it's regarded as a fantastic source of rapid energy, in part why it's rapidly turned to substrate known as ketones, as one may have guessed, and is, hell, even been in some data, been shown to be more efficient than glucose. It's also been shown to potentially have the satiating effect in studies in terms of satiation of hunger, as I just said. Wow, I'm doubling over myself. It's a long day on Saturday. And this is accomplished through ghrelin reduction, the hunger hormone. So it has some really cool things in here. It also has some benefits as being antibacterial and, interestingly, reducing overall gut inflammation versus via suppression of interleukin. This translates to smoother digestion and can help those with a leaky gut or gut sensitivity. So that makes it a really cool source, and not going beyond just the benefits of, satiation, cognition, so on and so forth, it can have some health benefits as well, potentially. So that's some interesting stuff. Research is still ongoing, but promising. The next one that's very common is C10. This is one that a lot of people get tripped up on when they think of things like coconut oil. It's found in both coconut and palm kernel, and the main specific benefits of this are more so on the antifungal property side of it. There's data suggesting they can reduce and mitigate 3 strains of Candida, which is a yeast that can cause digestive issues, making a very powerful effect for overall digestion. And one cool note here, being a new dad of a 1-year-old, is that there's been some cool data suggesting, but not proven, that it could be beneficial in breastfeeding applications. In one particular study, C10 was supplemented to breastfeeding mothers and did have antimicrobial properties passed on to the infants, with the increased resistance to infections and viruses being the outcome. Very cool, another notch in the breastfeeding versus formula category potentially. Still up for a debate, but interesting fact, and an interesting thing to study. And though it's a very cool characteristic, the same power has to be replicated in multiple studies because so far, while it may be suggested, it's not exactly a proven thing. Very cool though, can only help. Interesting. Last but not least of the 3, the C12. This is the lauric acid, and people are going to harp on this, saying it may not be a true MCT. Although it does possess enough properties that's always relevant in this discussion, especially with the popularity of coconut oil. People use it in everything. Okay? The benefits associated with it is that it does make up a large percentage of fatty acids, as I mentioned, in both coconut and palm oil, and it can be basically the most highly antimicrobial of all the MCTs, and it's actually converted into a substance known as monolaurin. This is some actually very impressive stuff, as it has been shown to kill pathogens like staph, E. coli, herpes simplex, and even measles. So it may not be the best thing for energy production, but it does have some very cool positive benefits, which is very interesting. Another thing that's very interesting about this is going beyond just the antimicrobial properties internally, it can also be an effective acne treatment when used on the skin. And the data on this is very impressive, that it might be even more impressive than over-the-counter acne medications like benzoyl peroxide in some subjects. So, anyway, I'm going to wrap this up. For the scope of this video, I'm hoping that you got a brief informative insight on what MCTs are, what benefits they have, very short form, as well as what the different types are. And while you, like myself, may not necessarily be a keto enthusiast, don't let the hype and the correlation to this trending diet fool you. MCTs are not a new thing, and their benefits are indeed real and here to stay. You can consider giving them a shot and see how they impact you personally, or you may have been surprised with the effects and enjoy the video. Either way, it's some cool stuff. The source doesn't matter, you get what you pay for, and as always, there's always ongoing science. Anyway, this has been Drew Peters, VP of Science and Innovation at Alphaline, discussing MCTs, the science behind it, and my preferred source, C8Vantage Nutrition.